So to start, the private placement what it essentially is an alternative to an IPO where funds can be raised for the firm, but without having to be registered to the SEC. Today we'll be talking about the private placement, offering memorandums, the regulations, the due diligence, and the anatomy of a term sheet. So to start off, the PPO, like I said, it was the alternative to an IPO. So it's carried out by selling the securities to selected investors, referred to as accredited investors. Accredited investors can be individuals or firms. For an individual, the criteria for an accredited investor is $200,000 to $300,000 of annual income and holding that threshold beyond the after the investment. So for firms, they have to be private firms with $5 million in assets, and they cannot be firms solely for the purpose of acquiring these said securities. So going along with the advantages of the PPO are that it saves time, and money without having it, because they don't have to register with the SEC. It also has the freedom to sell securities to knowledgeable investors by their own means and negotiations, and it allows the firm to remain private and not register with the SEC. So some disadvantages to a PPO would be that buyers would expect a higher rate of return compared to a standard publicly traded security from the firm offering the PPO. Also, since a credit rating is not needed, a buyer could require collateral security to protect their investment, and also they could ask for a higher demand of ownership, which can leave the firm kind of in the middle, having to negotiate on this matter, whether they're able to keep board seats and things like that. So moving on to the other portion, which is due diligence. So it's an investigation or audit of the potential investment to confirm all the facts. This became common with the Securities Act of 1933, where brokers were tasked with the responsibility to fully disclose information on the securities that they were selling. And this was met with very harsh consequences for not complying, which could be criminal prosecution, but also it also provided some protection to the brokers who did not have the facts readily available to them at the time of sale. So usually due diligence is a 10-step process that is very unique to every transaction. So no one way of doing this is correct. The 10-step processes can be done anywhere or provide anywhere from valuations on the income statements to even corporate culture, even finance, so it includes financial ratios as well, to all analyze. And like I said, not every transaction is going to be using these 10 steps. Maybe higher mergers and acquisitions will be using these 10 steps, but smaller firms would not be susceptible to using the 10. There's also a part called soft due diligence, which goes into more beyond the numbers. It goes into studying the corporate culture and industry events and just the customer base and everything that can't be met with just numbers. So moving on into the anatomy of a term sheet. Every term sheet is different because no 1-2 transactions are the same. With that being said, so there's no standard sheet for term sheets. So a lot of these are very industry specific and firm specific as well. So the firm of offering a PPO of like the oil industry is not going to have the same one offering of some kind of food service provider. They're going to have completely different term sheets and what they include into their agreements. So it essentially outlines all the parameters of the investment. Some key areas that I like highlighted and I thought were important were the pre-money and valuations, liquidation preferences as to how to go about a liquidation, anti-dilution protection, board seat control, which is very important and not something that people easily want to give up, and then also the rights of refusals of what like the company can or can't do without the investor's choice. So moving on to the final part of the presentation with the regulations. There's the Securities Act of 1933, and the SEC enacted three major rules that go into the regulations of private placement offerings and memorandums. So looking back into this this project, definitely learned a lot more than I ever knew. I never really knew what a private placement offering was. So what it boils down to is it is just a alternative to an IPO. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.